Hello everybody and welcome to Adobe Live. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming today and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Flynn and I am hosting today. I'm very excited to be joined by the fantastic, the wonderful Sophie Elinor. Hi Sophie, how you doing?
Hi Flynn, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm just turning that music down because I don't know if it's just loud in my headphones or if it's loud on the stream. Let me know, guys. But I'm great. I'm very excited to be hanging out with you. We've got a really fun couple of streams lined up. What's new in Sophie's world before we get stuck into it?
Oh, what's new? I feel like it's the same old, really. More color, more play. Yeah, just more of the good stuff.
Yeah, just funneling all that fun in. That's great. Well, we are now on the, kind of reintroducing some of our favorite Asia Pacific artists to kind of a bit of a global channel. We're here on the global, Johanna in chat, that top is gorgeous in capitals.
Oh, thank you.
So I thought we'd kick off today by maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of jump into the topic of today.
Yeah, sure. So I am a graphic designer, but I kind of specialize in typography related things. So I always say I just call myself a type dork more broadly. Try not to take it all too seriously, but my work often involves like a lot of play, a lot of heavily saturated colors, and lots of lettering specific things. I just really love playing in that typographic realm. To me, it's this like beautiful place where kind of language and design intertwine a little bit. And there's lots of experimentation to be had in that space. So sometimes it's things like illustration, sometimes it's animated work, and that could be like in Photoshop doing frame by frame stuff, or in After Effects kind of playing more with vectors. But yeah, that's kind of the realm in which I work.
Yes, fantastic. Lots of color, lots of fun. We have a bunch of live streams that we've done over the years as well. You can check out. There's Adobe Max stuff as well. I think you've done two Adobe Max sessions.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I wasn't actually sharing your screen. Let's bring this up.
Oh, that's all right.
This is your Instagram as well, if anyone wants to go and check it out. I love, there's so many like the short animations that are really playful, lots of fun, lots of color, as you said.
Yeah. Color is definitely a big part of it, and play as well. Stop motion, digital design, static sort of illustration work, lots of things in that sort of world.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have the bluey thing that you and Kit worked on?
Oh yeah.
I don't think we've spoken. Can you just tell us about this before we kick things off? Because this is such a cool project and I haven't spoken to you about it. I think I blew up your comments. Like what?
So I feel like Kit and I owe you a bit of a debt with this, because we kind of like, we followed each other online and whatnot, but we met in person through Adobe Live.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
When we were hanging out in Sydney late last year. So Kit was approached by the Bluey team to come up with an animation to help launch a thing called Bluey's World, which is essentially they're creating to scale like sets and props and scenes from the show in Brisbane for people from all over the world. I think Tourism Brisbane were part of it as well. Is kind of like this international sort of destination to come and check out. Kit was sort of brought in for her beautiful paper crafts and like handmade style, but she needed someone to pull the animation together. So because we'd sort of hung out through Adobe, she hit me up and I absolutely lost my cool when she told me who the client was. I was like, oh my God, Bluey, are you serious? Awesome. Absolutely, yes. So then, we spent a couple of days together in Sydney, shooting the whole thing, and just juggling 1,000 different pieces of scrap paper, and it was such a fun thing to work on. Love Kit, love Bluey. This is like a dream project to work on together.
That's perfect. That's awesome. Yeah. I thought of it just then and I was like, I remember seeing this towards the end of last year.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, should we get stuck into what we're going to do today?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you a big Valentine's Day kind of guy? Or
Oh
is that,
yeah, like every
yeah?
guy. I look forward to Valentine's Day more than anything else. I don't.
Better than your birthday?
I get like, I get Valentine's Day. I don't know. Married, been around. I have this thing against flowers, because I love growing flowers, but I don't like the idea of like ripping them out, putting them in a vase, and then throwing them in.
It's a little bit macabre when you think about it in that way, isn't it?
Like,
You're
hey,
like killing
watch these die.
slowly inside.
So anyway, but actually last year I got my wife, because she does like flowers, so it's a bit of a tension point. I got her dried natives, so they're all dried out, and they still exist. They've lasted 2 moves.
Yeah, nice. Oh, they came with you through the move.
Yeah, they've survived the move. Yeah, so
that's solid.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm jumping in, but
I'm also not really a big Valentine's kind of person. But what I do like is any excuse like to celebrate the people that we love.
Yes.
And happy to do that any day of the week, any time of year. So I thought for our streams this week, we might sort of center it on that sort of theme a little bit. But what we're going to do today is some illustrative lettering. Cool. And we're going to kind of base it loosely off a piece that I did a little while ago, which there's something a bit gross about this, with the tongues sort of twisting around each other. And I like that it's sort of a heartfelt message with like a bit of a gross tilt to it.
Right. Yes.
There's something about those two things together that tickles me a little bit. So we're gonna basically recreate this style of lettering in Illustrator. And I thought, again, given that we're sort of thematically basing this in the sort of lovey-dovey realm, the phrase that we're going to work on is "got the hots."
Oh, love it. Love it. Got the hots is, I don't know, is that international audience? Is that something that is a thing?
I was trying to think about this, because to me it feels very Australian. Yeah. And it feels very sort of like suburban 90s also. Yes, totally. A little bit.
Like Home and Away kind of. Oh man,
yeah.
That person. Yeah.
And I like how stupid you feel when you say it as well. Like trying to say I've got the hots for someone in a serious way. Like there's just no
there's no way to do it.
Man, I really got the hots for that person. Like
awesome.
So yeah, that's the phrase we're gonna do. Got the hots, and we're gonna do some sort of like twisty tongue kind of illustrative lettering. And we're going to start that by using a typeface as a base. So shall we just jump in and
let's do it. Got the hots.
Yeah, got the hots. So if we just go back to our little reference image here, there's kind of a script nature to this. Yeah. It's not, it kind of is script and it kind of isn't script, because instead of the letters connecting, they sort of twist around each other. But we can use a script typeface as a base for this. So I'm just gonna use my little filter functionality up here and just sort of search for script fonts just to see. I'm just trying to find something that's, gonna be a nice base for this.
Yeah. So this is an approach when you're doing script fonts, like rather than starting from scratch, you can kind of skeleton.
Yeah. And not just for script fonts, I'll often do this for any sort of like block lettering or anything in that kind of universe. The finished artwork is really going to be nothing like what we're starting with. I kind of just see this as, almost like, when you see artists, like painters, for example, who put a wash over the canvas before they start painting on it, just so there's not like harsh white kind of peeking through.
Like a primer or something.
Yeah. It's a primer. That's a much more succinct way of putting what I'm trying to articulate. Thank you.
Lovely.
So yeah, we're just going to use an existing typeface as a primer. Thank you. And really sort of pull this apart and play with it. And what we will have in the end will kind of bear almost no resemblance to this, but it's just, you know, I guess this would also be the sketch phase. If I had a pencil and a sketchbook out, this would be the first thing I draw before like pulling this apart a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're just going to use this as a little base. And on top of this, I'm just going to lock that layer too so I don't accidentally bump it. On top of this, I'm going to just really loosely, using my pencil tool, draw over the top.
You just round capped those corners and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Just so I've got a less sort of harsh line, because again, the illustration that we're aiming for is quite rounded. So I'm just gonna really loosely just kind of go over the top of this, and I'm not sort of being too precious about any of this. Please don't tune out at this point, because I promise it will get better. and
that's
sort
the
of
stream, ladies and gentlemen. Sophie Elinor.
How does she do it?
Awesome.
Imagine.
I would love to cut someone off like that one day. I would never do it, but gosh, it'd be fun. Say, oh, we've been offline for the last 40 minutes.
You've been streaming to no one.
Streaming to no one. Everybody, by the way, if you have questions as we're going along, your lettering questions, illustrator questions, those sorts of things, don't be afraid to throw it in chat, because we are able to answer them. So throw it in. And no one's told me if internationally, if Got the Hots is something that they've heard maybe in high school or something like that.
I would really love to know, because I'm struggling to hear it in any other accent other than Australian.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't feel right with like an American or a British accent, but maybe that's just my you know, because I heard it so often when I was a teenager.
I feel like those things changed a lot regionally. Like, you could go into state and, I don't know, say, like someone dating someone might be like, they're not going steady, but it could be something like that. Like, whatever. Going steady
is so funny.
Right?
That is so funny.
I'm trying to think of what it would have been like. Going out together or something would have been something, I think, that would have been consistent in my school. But it could have changed. Like, even you go to Victoria, they'd be like, what does that mean? New South Wales? Anyway.
I love it.
Digress.
So we've got our first very rough pass at a version of the font, and I've really just done this so that I can get my stroke outlines to play with. At the moment, there's no fill; it's just a stroke sort of applied to these lines. I think the font that we looked at had a bit of an italic lean to it, and I think I want to just straighten this up a smidge. Right. So I'm just gonna bring this. Just gonna bring it upright. Oh my god!
Oh, amazing. What tool are you using to do this?
How does she do it? It's the shear tool in here, nice. which can be quite a volatile thing if you just move it like one pixel in the wrong direction. All of a sudden, it's like upside down and twisty, topsy-turvy kind of thing. But if you can, a very light touch is needed with this one.
Yeah. So
I think that's looking a little bit better already, just kind of having it a bit more upright. Mm-hmm. And so now the thing that I'm looking at to really customize this is, how can I sort of tessellate these letters together a little bit better instead of this sort of out of the box font that we started with. So for example, the sort of ascender of the H and the descender of the G are kind of tucking in quite nicely together there. That's resolved that bit of space quite nicely, but there is a big bit of empty space underneath this T and above the E. So maybe that's something we can look at. And there's also quite a bit of space in here. So I think, again, this is another thing that I do, is I will take 1,000 copies of kind of where I'm up to in case I need to backtrack at any point, and also so I can kind of track my progress as I go along with this. The first thing I think I might play with is to bring a bit more personality into these crossbars of the T's. I think we can kind of just add a little bit of like more kind of custom, more of a custom feel to that there. This guy can be a nice long crossbar in here. If he tucks into this space, that might resolve this kind of area in here a little bit. And then I'm looking at this T and H combo here, and I'm kind of thinking maybe we can have a bit of a custom ligature here where this sort of loopy return of the H.
Oh, fancy.
Yes, we are getting a bit fancy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of helped resolve some of this spacing up here. However, we now have this kind of crashing into the base of our G.
Yep.
So what we might do is maybe just shorten the height of those ascenders. They probably don't need to be quite as long as we've got them. So that can probably come down a little. We're still reading that pretty clearly as a T and a H. We're not sort of compromising the legibility at all there. That's still pretty clear.
And how are you just re-going over that line again and again without deleting the line and then redoing it?
Yeah. So the pencil tool is probably my favorite tool in all of Illustrator. It's a really basic one.
You've got the hots for the pencil tool.
I've got the hots. I do, big time. If you have whatever sort of vector outline you have selected, if you switch over to the pencil tool and just draw over the top of that, it's gonna sort of snap to wherever you've drawn it. It doesn't work if you kind of miss altogether. It's just going to draw a new line. But if you are kind of just drawing over the top,
cool.
It's just adjusting as you draw over it. I feel like it's my digital version of, you know, the chicken scratching sort of drawing that you do, where you do 1,000 little lines with a pencil instead of just confidently drawing one line.
Right. Yeah.
It kind of appeals to my tendency to draw in that way. You can kind of just focus on little bits at a time. It's
a little bit like onion skinning in animation a little bit too, right? Like you're kind of re-going over something, but you're trying to get it perfect. So it's kind of, but you've got the guide of the original one there.
Yeah.
You can say no. Yeah.
I'm trying to yes and with you here.
Yeah, I know. You're allowed 2 no's per stream, and I'm going to take that. Yeah,
I'm going to save them. I'm going to save them for later.
Save it up. You know, there's going to be more. Oh dear.
Oops. The nice thing about this sort of method of drawing too is you can always just, you know, undo it if something drastic happens and it all sort of falls apart. This G here, I'm not sure that having this sort of loopy kind of return on the descender is really working. I think it's maybe cluttering this sort of top area here a little. And so I'm thinking instead of having it sort of loop back and return, we might just have a nice kind of big curve kind of pulling around in this area.
Yeah.
Which feels just a little bit cleaner, I think.
Yeah. And what are your smooth settings usually for something like this? Is there much of a smoothing thing going on with your pencil tool?
No, I try not to, because I think that's sort of the beauty of this particular tool, is that it feels a lot closer to drawing analog.
Yeah.
You know, like it's your hand and it's a pencil basically. So I try to sort of limit the amount of interference from the machine itself.
Right.
So I feel like this is looking a little bit cleaner up top, but what we might do is kind of bring this guy, this letter T, down a little, just to, again, try and resolve some of this spacing between these two, and bring the E up just a smidge. Now that spacing in there is feeling a lot less uneven, I suppose.
Yeah.
And again, because we're doing this hand lettering, it doesn't really matter if it's perfect. We sort of don't want it to be. We want it to feel like it's been made by a human hand, you know?
Right. So you don't want to be copying like a particular arc or stroke just to get it perfect. You want it to be close, but not identical.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of symmetry.
Right.
I think with this sort of thing, balance is a lot more important than symmetry.
Oh. Interesting. I like that balance.
Yeah. So like even if you just look at got and there's kind of a nice sort of balance with those crossbars of the T. They're definitely not the same curve. You can see that they're different, but they're following a similar sort of flow, and that is quite pleasing to look at. Whereas if it was identical, totally symmetrical, I feel like it loses a bit of that human sort of handmade flavor.
Yeah.
And now let's have a look at HOTS. I think this little sort of loopy return on the H is feeling a bit too tight. We've got these really nice open sort of looser curves up top.
Yep.
So we might sort of try and mirror this kind of shape of the H here a little bit, which again will help sort of resolve this kind of negative space that we've got in this area. Maybe not quite so big. Oops. So we've got this kind of, again, it's not symmetrical and it's not mirrored, but it's sort of reflecting the shape of this letter H up here.
Yeah, got it.
It's a little bit. Well, maybe we want to make that a bit bigger. Actually, looking at this, if we step back from this and have a little look where we are here, there's something about this, because we had to sort of adjust this letter T kind of going into this big curve down the bottom here. I feel like we can maybe bring a bit of that sort of DNA into this H down here, and maybe instead of having it join the O, we can...
Oh, that's cool.
We can just sort of bring it down here.
Yeah.
Maybe give it a tiny bit more space. So already that's feeling like a lot more balanced, I think, and a lot more sort of pleasing.
Yeah.
Than where we started. Might just give this S a bit more presence on the page. It's looking a little skimpy. Cool.
Yeah, they look like they have a relationship, right? Like they can kind of see similarities in the negative space, in the curves, and like the weight of the O and the E. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So at the moment, again, we've got those crossbars of the T's are giving us a really nice sort of fluidity. The way that the T in got and the H have this kind of scoopy sort of thing going on. And generally we've just got some nice sort of open curves that we can play with a little bit here. I'm going to bring another copy across here just so we've got a little frame of reference. If we go back again, just one more time to have a look at the way that these letters interact when they're turned into tongues. The L kind of goes a bit beyond the O. It doesn't just sort of stop when it reaches the O, because we want it to sort of scoop around a little bit. And so I think what we want to do now is, where we do have these connecting lines, is we want to just sort of extend them a little and just kind of imagine how, if it was a tongue, how it might wrap around the shape of its neighboring letter.
Okay, cool.
So this one, I think, can just kind of scoop around like that. It's going to look like I'm making this worse at this point, but I promise we'll rebuild. It'll be all good, I promise. Maybe this guy can kind of scoop around in that way and just sort of peek in between these two sort of lines of the H here.
That's cool.
The H can kind of, might loosen that curve up a bit and come around like this. And I might just round that E out a little bit, just so we've got a little bit more room to play with when we do bring this around. And then our last two little letters that we'll do the same to here is just bringing these around.
Nice.
Oh man, sometimes you'll go over the same line like 10 times, and each time it's worse in a new way. You're like, I should have stopped this 5 minutes ago.
It's like every time I try to draw digitally. It's never gotten better.
I might just, before we go any further, fatten up these letters a tiny bit. I want to see sort of how far I can fatten them without kind of closing in those counters of the letters too much.
Right.
That's looking a little bit better to me. Actually, I might scrap this one because we didn't really do anything here. Bring this guy down. And now what I'm going to do is convert this to outlines.
Okay.
So at the moment we've got just open lines with a stroke applied, but I want to convert them to closed in shapes. So we're just going to expand to fill and stroke. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I'm doing that, to just one more time go back to our reference, you can see that wherever there is a line overlapping, there's kind of been a sliver knocked out, so right, that you don't get that kind of I guess it's almost like an ink trap if you were talking in printing terms. We're trying to open up the space a little bit and clarify where those lines are going, and just make the flow of it all a little bit cleaner and a bit smoother.
Right.
So what that will look like is, because we've now got closed in shapes, I can apply a stroke to the outside of those. And if we bump that up a little bit, you kind of get a bit of a sense of where I'm going with it. Like, for example, if we look at the T and the H here, the kind of crossbar of this H leading in now is not kind of losing itself against the downstroke of the T.
Yep. That's cool.
Now, in order to get that sort of in front and behind, twisting around, letters interacting with each other thing, once upon a time would have involved a lot of like drawing of little shapes over the top of things and trying to knock different sections out and whatnot. But in one of the more recent Illustrator updates, they brought in a feature called the intertwine tool.
Oh yeah.
Have you played with this much yourself?
Yeah. This was all the rage at Max. I think it was two years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of like pulling out laptops and playing with it. Like right after the keynote.
I watched that keynote and my jaw hit the floor when I saw this one particular thing. So I was like, that is the black magic to me. I don't understand how they've managed to build this functionality in, but it is so useful. just in object, where'd we go? Intertwine, object, intertwine, make. So I've selected my little artwork here, and you can kind of see if I zoom right in, you can kind of see if I hover over anywhere where there's two objects overlapping, it sort of does this grayed out thing. If I just click on it, it brings the whole thing in front, which is kind of not what I want. I want there to be like a bit of interaction between the two. But I can use this like little lasso sort of a tool here to just highlight the area that I want to bring in front. And yeah, it's not totally perfect. But again, we're just kind of using this to kind of get as far as we need to, and then we can fill in the gaps.
Right.
So again, I'm just sort of roughing this out. In this area, I want this little guy to come forward. Here, I think we want tip. We want this little section here. Whoops. Oh God, let's try that again. And then this part just here can come in front.
Nice.
It's rough, but
you're starting to see it though. You can see
it's starting to take shape a little bit.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm going to do just while I'm in this stage is just draw over the top wherever I've got my when I converted it to outlines, it's kind of made this one single shape, and I've lost the sort of lines that will separate that section. So I'm just going to draw just really loosely a couple of little lines over the top. You can see it just cleans up that area, and it gives your eye somewhere to follow instead of getting lost in the mud a little bit.
Yeah. Gives that illusion of like depth as well.
Yeah,
like they're noodles instead of lines.
Yes. And I feel like we might just bring this S in a little, because that's getting a tiny bit muddy just there. And the same with this T. We can just sort of bring it in a tiny bit just to help line up those lines a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, did we lose our lines here? No.
Would you ever use a different outline other than the same color as the background to like make it a bit easier to see at this stage?
I feel like I would get more distracted by that, because I'd be like, I'd be like, oh, the colors aren't quite right, or I don't know.
Yep.
I like at this stage just kind of working in a very like black and white sort of a palette to begin with. Like color is always my favorite thing to inject at the end of the project, but I think when you're sort of at this stage, it's really easy to like jump ahead and get lost with, oh, this color doesn't go with that color or whatever. Whereas this, when it's just in black and white, I feel like I focus a bit better on things like balance and, you know, weight distribution and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not being particularly precious with this, because I'm going to come back and sort of adjust all of these bits and pieces. But I think we're looking pretty good at the moment. So at this point, again, I'm going to take, take another copy of this and just chuck it over here. Yeah, but without without having like draft 13 or whatever.
No version
Speaking
control.
of saving. Yeah.
It's over there.
It's just to the side. Yeah. It's fine. I think I might put this piece, send that guy to the back because it's a bit cluttered when he's in front. Same with this guy. The poor downstroke of the T is getting chopped into 1,000 pieces. So if we just send that guy to the back, just sort of cleans that area up a little bit. And now we're going to do the same thing we did before and just expand our outlines. And it's, again, going to look like a bit of a hot mess to begin with. When we do that, Illustrator will automatically just kind of group everything together, which is handy because now when we double click into it, we can, so select everything that's the same fill color. What I want to do here is basically just get rid of all of the white. That's purely just, actually, sorry, before we do that, I've missed a crucial step here. We've expanded our outlines. What we now need to do is use the Pathfinder tool and kind of divide that whole thing.
Right.
Kind of cookie cutter everything out into different pieces. And now when I double click in, if I just select any random piece, you can see these are all now separate pieces. I want to get rid of the white. So if I just select something that I know is white and then select same fill color, it's going to highlight everything at once and I can just get rid of it all in one go.
Nice.
I don't think, sometimes when you do this, there'll be here, like this object which has no fill at all. So I'm just going to do the same thing. Yeah, there's a few of those in there and we don't need them. So we're just going to delete those out. And because we had all these overlapping lines, our now smooth shapes are in 1,000 pieces, but we can just use the Pathfinder tool to kind of smush that back together.
Nice. That's a cool tip. I like that.
Not sure what that dot is there. Let's get rid of that guy. And so now we've got like a lump of clay that we can play with and make into something a bit more interesting. This is where the pencil tool, I think, is a really like beautiful medium to use because, you know, we've got these perfectly rounded corners and we've got a shape that, even though where we've cut it out, it's looking a bit janky, but we can tidy all of that up just going over our outlines. So wherever there's kind of a really sharp corner, I'm just going to knock some of that out and soften it a little bit. And also in these areas where you can see that it's cut in a way that's, you know, not, it's just a little bit rough. It's added in like 1,000 anchor points and we just don't need those. But we can.
And you're not holding anything down to do that. You're just drawing back over.
Just, yeah, literally straight over the top of it.
Cool.
I might taper this end a little bit because we don't really need it to be a perfect circle.
So you're trying to take away the perfect, I was going to say, you're trying to take away how perfect that shape was.
Yeah. It's a funny dance we do, isn't it? It's like, I need to make this perfectly imperfect.
Right.
Yeah. At the moment, it looks too computer generated, too crisp and clean, and we don't want that. We want it to feel like a human made it. And yeah, this is the best way that I know how to do this anyway. There's definitely like automations you can do, like, you know, like a roughen edges tool or similar sorts of things. I'm going to fatten out this edge where it becomes the tongue because I sort of want to exaggerate that section.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's the same with you, Flynn, but I always find that I spot those tools a mile away. Like if someone's done, you know, I'll just auto generate this instead of taking the time to draw the texture. I'm like, I can see the difference.
Yeah. There's a litany of cardinal sins, isn't there? That I think you learn once in your career and then you'll never unsee them. I think one of the first ones that I recognized that I learned early on was like recognizing a script font as opposed to something that's hand done, and there's two E's and the E's are identical.
Oh, yeah.
And
Like, can't fool me. I see what
I
you're doing
see
there.
this copy paste you've been up to. Even in a logo as well, which I think is a bit of a, can be a pretty,
you can't be doing that in a logo.
pretty big faux pas. Like, it's kind of pick a font and that's the logo, and you're like,
Yeah,
these E's are identical. So that's a thing. Certainly places for that, but it can look quote unquote wrong, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes you out of it, doesn't it? It immediately loses its personal touch.
Yeah.
When you spot that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I think it's also like some of the things that exist within, particularly Illustrator. I think very early on in this, you round capped your corners, and I think a really sharp like vector pointing out at a cap is a bit of a dead giveaway as well. Again, just one of those 10 commandments of graphic design. I think you get this artifacting. You guys probably know what I'm talking about without seeing it, but trying to draw some custom shape, but the corners are not capped. If they're not capped, you kind of get this sharp like vector going off just for some reason in the opposite direction. That's one. Those are two that I can think of. You got any?
You talking to me or are you talking to the chat?
I'm talking to you or chat. If chat's got any, I'd love to. Chat's being a bit quiet today, so I don't want to make anybody type if they don't feel like it today. All the talk about love. Let us know if there's any that you spot. But Sophie, is there any that you spot? Anything that you see?
I think it is mostly those like automated effects.
Yeah.
It just immediately kind of takes me out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose they do have their place. I think in if we're looking at animation stuff like we will be tomorrow, I think there are some sort of like automated textures that you get away with a little bit more when it's animated because you're only seeing it for a single frame.
Right.
Whereas when it's a static thing, it's not as easy to hide.
Yeah.
I do still think there's a difference and a noticeable difference between, for example, applying a texture to a vector item versus drawing each frame. You can definitely sort of spot that difference. But yeah, I just always appreciate a lot more when someone takes the time to kind of craft something a bit more custom.
Yeah.
Just feels a bit more special and a bit more, I think maybe in like a bit of an age where, not necessarily, I mean, AI can do hand-drawn stuff also, but like, there's just something that is refreshing, I suppose, when it's got that human sort of aspect to it.
Yeah, totally.
This part of the process I always find quite therapeutic. You're just kind of noodling away. I'm generally, what I'm trying to do here is fatten up the ends where the tip of the tongue will be and kind of taper off the other end, just so we've got a bit of thick and thin sort of weight distribution kind of happening.
Yeah. Makes sense thickening up the tongues, but yeah, I didn't think of kind of the contrast by contrasting to, the other ends.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be fine without it, but I think, again, it's just giving that slightly more sort of handmade flavor a little bit. Ooh.
Bye-bye, yes.
Ooh, okay. So we haven't quite cut that exactly where we need to. So let's just give this a little cut here and here. Our two shapes merged a little bit in the Pathfinder-ness of it all.
So they join together when...
Yeah. That's okay. We can... Yeah. Now that S is getting a little bit skinny at the top here. So this might need a little bit of attention, just kind of fattening that back up again to so we don't lose the shape of it.
You're right. Yep. It's that balance between what you're kind of illustrating and like legibility.
Yeah. I'm kind of in the weeds at the moment, just trying to smooth everything out, but it is always good to sort of take a step back once you finish that bit and just go, hang on, can we still read this? Does this still make sense?
Yep.
I saw on Instagram just earlier this morning, you know, Ono Typeco, the font foundry?
Yes.
The guy who runs that's been playing around a lot lately with the pencil tool and just having a really nice time, which I find really interesting as someone like him coming from a sort of type design background where the pen tool is kind of king.
Yeah.
I imagine it would be quite a nice sort of change of pace to use something that's so imperfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like interesting, like type families. It's such a in-depth, complicated cross between like intersection of design and art, right? Like it, and then this whole, I don't know, it's, I've only ever seen a couple of people kind of give talks and everything on it. And I'm like, oh, this looks exhausting.
I made one font ever.
Yeah.
And it took me a year. It took me a full year
That's
to do
crazy.
it.
Yeah. I believe it. Yeah.
It's an unbelievable amount of work to do something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a little step back here and let's take a copy of this and just sit it next to where we kind of got up to. So it's feeling like it's got a lot of flavor already. Like, you know, it's not a huge jump, I suppose, from where we started, but it is also like there's not a lot of that sort of original DNA retained in there. But it certainly feels a lot more expressive and custom and cheeky and yeah, just a lot more personality, I think.
Yeah.
This H is looking, this curve here is not doing it for me. So just gonna tinker with this a little. And then to just sort of exaggerate the kind of illustrative nature of this, we're going to add a bit of detail into the tips of the tongues. And again, we're just going to switch back to stroke rather than fill. And make sure that we've got round caps. And just do a little bit of, ooh, that is too thick. Let's knock this down a little. Maybe 1.5 is good. Yeah, that looks good.
That's like a little bit of a shine, a little bit of
yeah, it's not a lot, but it's enough to just kind of give you the gist,
yeah.
You know? And I think the thing that it also helps with here is because we've where a script would normally, like the sort of outer like the connecting sort of lines would normally stop where this letter starts, we've got it overlapping, so just sort of taking a bit of the meat out of the shape here helps to clarify the letter H a little,
right,
if you know what I mean. Like
yeah.
If I take this away, it's just like quite a lot of black in that area, and it's like, oh, where does the T end and the H begin? But
right.
when we add it back in, it just sort of lightens that particular area.
Yeah, I see that. Nice. Like the little dots, like the little, like the line and then the dash.
That's feeling like it's added a lot without really a lot of effort back into it. Just from that to that's kind of taken it in a more illustrative sort of direction. Again, what I will do here is use the Pathfinder tool to just knock out those white shapes that we just added in. And the same method as before, just selecting that and deleting it out. So now you can kind of see we've got, if I take it over a different background, you can see that it's sort of knocked out of that shape.
Right. So it's not white color, it's
it's
through kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then just as the same way we did with the lettering overall, I'll kind of go back, and because we don't want those sort of perfect rounded edges, I will just spend a little bit of time kind of maybe tapering at the end and fattening it at the beginning kind of thing. Again, this is like we're really getting into the details with this bit.
Yeah.
You totally don't need to do this, but it's these little details that I think do make a bit of a difference.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, hey, we've got about 3 to 4 minutes left. That has gone that's gone really fast.
Okay.
Thanks, Jana, for the reminder.
I'll stop with the little tongue lines here, because let's just quickly add a bit of color in, because I feel like that's gonna bring a bit of excitement to the party.
Cool.
So let's just can't go past. Whoops! I can never go past like some nice bright yellow. So let's do that. And because they're tongues, let's go like a nice hot sort of pink to go with our got the hots. And then one last little detail, which I think kind of tips it in the more sort of gross direction, but which I love, is if we want to add like a little bit of like goopy sort of saliva coming off the tips of each tongue. A little bit of drool, exactly. So we can just draw like a really sort of rough kind of outline here. And let's give it a little gradient fill. We just want white going, let's say, from like, I don't know, 70 to 0 opacity. And if we just kind of go this way, just so it sort of disappears when it's on the tongue, but you sort of just get a hint of that.
That's cool.
Saliva.
Way to do that with the gradient, the exact same color, but changing the opacity. That's cool.
Yeah. And then I would redraw, I would draw like custom ones for each little area that you want to stick it on, but just to kind of give you a quick idea of, what that might look like when you've got a few different bits and pieces on there. Maybe we do one really long, big one here. So gross. I love it.
As we're adding these final ones out, there's just questions in chat. Sophie will be back tomorrow. We'll both be back, but we'll be jumping into After Effects, I believe.
Yes.
And making some things move. So it's like our static approach to type, and then tomorrow we'll be making things wiggle and jiggle.
We love to make things wiggle and jiggle.
Sophie will. I'll sit here and interrupt her. We should call it there, or we will run out of time, and I want to make sure we get to say our goodbyes. That's great. I love watching this all together. It is quite amazing how just throwing color, like those last few minutes, like really kind of brought it home.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to kind of go back and look at where you started with this too, because we've really sort of pushed and pulled and like handled the clay, I suppose, if you want to use that metaphor, to make it feel really custom and tailor-made and goopy, and there
we go. That's awesome. Well, thank you, chat. And as I said, we'll be back tomorrow. Same great channel, same great time. So Sophie,
same great time.
It's an amazing time.
It's the most beautiful time.
Oh, what a time. I had a great time, and I hope you did too, Sophie. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
I'll see you then.
Bye, everyone.